So kudos to the state of Connecticut for recently passing new gun legislation. I think it could be a model for the entire country. The Connecticut legislation adds 100 new assault weapons to the already existing assault weapons ban that they had. It closes the gun show loophole by extending background checks to private sales. It also requires that people buying both ammunition and magazines undergo background checks as well. And it limits the size of magazines to 10 rounds. So there's some serious new restrictions on gun ownership imposed by the state of Connecticut. So how did Wayne LaPierre of the NRA react to this new law? Well, he went on Fox and said it's going to be ineffective. It's not going to work. It is the wrong kind of law. Well, sadly, there is some truth to what Wayne LaPierre is saying. Regardless of how good the law is, it's not going to be effective if every state around it is more permissive. So as long as there is a conduit, a pipeline of guns, starting in the state of Mississippi, coming up through Virginia, and passing up into the Northeast, guns know no state boundaries. The state of Connecticut isn't going to be protected by its own laws. That's the reason why we need new federal legislation. People have said for the past 20 years, well, you see, the District of Columbia's gun laws are completely ineffective. Yes, they were ineffective because guns would come in from the state of Virginia with no problem, rendering the D.C. laws useless. People would say, well, the Chicago laws obviously don't work. Well, of course it doesn't work. If there are gun dealers right outside the city limits of Chicago selling guns in droves to people who immediately take them back into Chicago, they're going to make the Chicago law look bad. That doesn't mean it is bad. We need a federal law. Let's look at some of the other things that he said. He said that the real key to improvement in gun violence is to strengthen our mental health laws. Well, that's not true, Wayne. Take the case of Adam Lanza. From everything that I have read, there wasn't a person in the world that had any inkling that Adam Lanza was capable of the kind of violence that he committed. In fact, Adam Lanza was indistinguishable from thousands and thousands of people out there who are socially awkward, are withdrawn, who have difficulty communicating with other people. There are thousands of people like that who would never hurt anybody. It turns out, in the sort of the needle in the haystack principle, that Adam Lanza was one of them. But there is no way that anybody could have or did predict him, least of all his mother, who obviously was encouraging him up to the last day to use firearms. So the idea that somehow we can eliminate gun violence by starting to lock people up would be a gross violation of people's civil liberties, because we have incredible difficulty determining, out of the thousands of people who are having emotional problems, who that one person is who would commit horrific gun violence. Another big red herring in the gun debate is this idea of arming schools and arming teachers and posting sentries outside schools. There are a number of false premises involved in this would-be solution. The first false premise is that the schools are at risk. One terrible tragedy at an elementary school does not mean that all schools are at risk. Suppose, for example, that rather than going to the Sandy Hook Elementary School, Adam Lanza had decided on a Saturday morning to go to a soccer field somewhere in Connecticut where parents and kids had gathered in large numbers to play soccer. Suppose he had exacted his violence in a soccer field. Does that mean that we should be posting armed sentries outside every soccer field in America? Again, this is a case of missing the forest for the trees. Simply because we had a horrific event at Sandy Hook does not mean that every elementary school is at risk, any more than because Tucson took place outside of a Safeway, that we should all feel alarmed at going to a grocery store now. This is the NRA's way of diverting attention from the real issue of gun violence, which is that it takes place everywhere, all over the country. The gun debate seems to assume that if we can simply take care of Newtown, we will solve the gun problem. Quite to the contrary. If you eliminated Newtown, Aurora, Columbine, Tucson, the Sikh temple in Wisconsin, Virginia Tech, if you eliminated all of those tragedies, the enormity of the gun problem would still be the same. We've sort of been blinded by the fact that these tragedies take place. When the president talks about Newtown being the worst day of his presidency, I mean, I respect the president's empathy, and I understand where he's coming from. And when he refers to those precious 20 children who are lost, I understand completely what he's saying. But the reality is, those 20 kids from Newtown were no more precious than the 20 kids from Chicago who will lose their lives, or the 20 kids from Detroit, or the 20 kids from DC. Newtown and Aurora and Tucson are incredibly important in reminding us how out of whack our gun policy is in this country. But they are not the sum of the problem. The sum of the problem involves spouses killing one another. It involves children killing one another accidentally. It involves all the criminal activity and the gang activity that has nothing to do with mass murders. And please, can I stop hearing about the all-purpose villain, the all-purpose scapegoat for gun violence, video games? Enough about the video games. Video games are enjoyed by young and old all over the world in large numbers. So the video game consumption in the United States is no different than the video consumption in England, in France, Germany, Japan. In fact, by most accounts, the video game consumption in Japan is of a far more violent nature than we see in this country. However, all of the countries that I just named have gun homicide rates that are less than the United States by factors of 10, 20, 30. The number of gun homicides in 2009 in the United States was more than 40 times that of the gun homicide rate in Great Britain. So the idea that homicides are being spiked by increased watching of video games, to me, doesn't fly whatsoever. So let's revel in the fact that Connecticut had the courage and the wisdom to pass this law. It was passed by bipartisan majorities in the Connecticut legislature. And let's see if we can expand on that and come up with a national solution to the gun problem. I'm Jeff Rowan. I'll see you next time.